Yeah, so I'd really like to hear from you what freedom looks like.
Yeah, I think freedom is being able to, have a life where you're able to take off to be at your kid's baseball game at 1 p.m. on a Friday and really kind of live life on your terms and nobody else's terms.
Yeah. So what were you experiencing when you were working for other people?
Yeah. So I have a really vivid memory of being in the corporate world. So I was in the corporate world for 6 years before I bought a business, but yeah, I have a very vivid memory of being this was right after COVID, so everybody was working at home and, I was at my desk in my house on a Friday night and it was like 11:30 PM and people were going bonkers, just hitting me up to do work. And I think that's probably the turning point when I realized that this wasn't the life that I wanted long term. And I always knew that I was going to have to work really hard in life. And if I was going to work this hard, I wanted it to be my own thing. So that was when I started looking to buy a business and absolutely knew nothing about the SBA world or the small business world. Really, I was just working as a commercial real estate appraiser and just felt like I was at an all you can eat buffet of appraisals and had been for 5 or 6 years and just looked at the people ahead of me and, they were all really, they were in their 60s and workaholics and just still hitting the grindstone every day and working for somebody else. And that's not a bad life at all. It's a really good life. But I just, for me, I knew that that wasn't something that I wanted long term and that I really just wanted to do my own thing and figure out how to do something that was entrepreneurial. I'd always been really interested by it. So,
Yeah. No, I think that's great. It's a lifestyle for some people, but not the one you wanted. I love that. So one thing
mhm.
you said is you started looking for a business to buy around that time. What intrigued you about buying a business versus starting a business?
Yeah. Well, I didn't really have any super good ideas that I felt like would be able to come to fruition if I were to start a business and go that route. I have nothing against starting a business. Just for me, I felt more comfortable with buying something that was already established, and that was, the I think probably the most amount of risk that I wanted to take at that point in my life. And my dad was a huge proponent of just entrepreneurship and working for yourself and owning your own business. And through a lot of conversation with him, he kind of was told me that this was something that he would be willing to help me do if it was something that I wanted to pursue. And again, I really just knew nothing about that whole world, so I feel like I had a big leg up just because with his knowledge and background prior, it was a huge help having somebody to kind of show me the ropes on how you cultivate leads for businesses, going to meet with owners, and then the whole financing world came into play, and that I knew nothing about. So getting to see that and work through that firsthand I learned a ton. So that was definitely probably the biggest part of getting the whole thing closed. And then on January 30th of 2023, I became a business owner. So without really having a ton of prior knowledge beforehand. So we were able to do it.
That's great. What were some of those key things that you didn't know that would have been really, really helpful going into the whole process from initially finding the business to purchasing it to day one?
Mhm. I think whenever you buy a business, you just don't know what you don't know. And after being almost 4 years into this, I mean, you can always model and forecast and try to plan for things, and it just the chips are going to fall where the chips fall. And I've never seen a bad looking Excel model in my life, and I don't
Yeah.
know many people who have. But I think if I were to tell myself one thing before going into it, it would just be roll with the punches and to just not catastrophize everything. I think that first year, I had a really bad habit of just catastrophizing everything that would go wrong with the business because, I was the only employee. It was just me. I felt like I didn't really have, at least from an operational standpoint, anybody else to lean on. So My personality type, I have a bend towards trying to plan and think ahead and trying to figure out everything that could possibly go wrong before the situation actually plays out.
Yeah.
So you just can't do that. You have to just put the best foot forward that you can in any given situation that you're working on. And again, I mean, I know I just said this, but let the chips fall where the chips are going to fall. And I think being willing to take that risk is really that's a lot of what this is all about is being able to take a risk and put yourself out there and try to, create value in whatever marketplace is that you're competing in. So,
Yeah. So aluminum alloys, that's your company, and
mhm.
you're a aluminum distributor. And how long had the company been around before you took it over?
Yeah. So yes, aluminum alloys is my business. The company was started in 1979, I believe, by the previous owner's father. And he wholeheartedly believed in working for himself, had some relationships in the aluminum industry already, felt like he could leverage them. He worked for a big producer for a long time that smelted aluminum and took that leap of faith, went out on his own, started aluminum alloys in the late '70s, had it ever since then. His son took it over from him somewhere along the timeline, I think of the mid '80s, and then had been running it ever since until he kind of got involved in the picture in 2022 was when we started.
Wow.
So
What stuck out about aluminum alloys that when you saw it on paper, you're like, man, this is going to be a business that I want to buy.
there wasn't really anything that stuck out other than the fact of, it's aluminum ingot distribution. Obviously, it's a very niche thing. It's kind of one of those deals where you tell people you do it for a living. They're like, wow, I didn't know you could do that for a living. And it's kind of at least it seems to be what everybody's reaction is.
Yeah,
And I think it stuck out for no other reason other than, we were looking at buying a window manufacturing and install company. Obviously, it didn't work out. We had looked at 4 or 5 deals prior to this one, and we can get into that a little bit more. But to answer your question, yeah, we got off the call, knew we weren't going to buy it, and I was kind of looking through the rest of the brokers listings that we were working with and saw aluminum ingot distribution company for sale, and just started asking questions about it and was like, "Hey, could we get a meeting with the owners? This just seems interesting." So we met with the owner and things kind of just started to snowball from there and they went well. So
that's great.
that was really how it all got started.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like most little boys don't say, "Hey, when I grow up, I want to be an aluminum ingot distributor," you know. But so often, what I've seen is these boring businesses. They're just cleaning companies, service businesses. It's a quote boring business, but on paper, it makes money and it's profitable and it's a good business to be in because it's needed.
Absolutely. There's this whole kind of sect, if you will, of businesses out there right now where, they're too big for just kind of, I guess, anyone and everyone to kind of take down on their own, and then they're too small for private equity to come get involved. And, of course, the kids don't want it and they're on their second, third generation of ownership. And, they're going to close their doors because there's just nothing else, for them to nowhere for them to go. The owner, wants to retire. And so I was really shocked whenever we started looking and just how much was actually out there, how much opportunity was out there, how many different things you can do to make a living. And yeah, it's absolutely incredible. So
Yeah. So if you could sum up the last 4 years of being in business for yourself, how would you sum that up?
I would describe it as getting in your truck on I-75 and just throwing the steering wheel out the window and describe it. No, I mean,
Yeah.
it hasn't been all bad. There's been a lot of ups and downs. It's been the biggest personal growth experience that I've had in my life up to this point. It's really taught me how to just figure things out, for lack of a better term. How to jump into different situations that I really don't have experience dealing with and figure them out. And just you learn a ton that way. We bought the business in 2023, January of 2023. I think I already mentioned this was when we closed, but we were dealing with a pretty high interest rate environment at that point in time. So, it's really felt like just a slog trying to get, debt paid off. We were fortunate the seller was willing to carry a small portion of the note as well. We got him paid off last year, which was a really, really big milestone for us. So he's totally done. And now we're just working on the SBA side to get that paid down. But yeah, it's been a 4 years defined by crazy ups, crazy downs. I think for the first year, I was probably curled up into the fetal position a little bit more than I'm
Uh,
comfortable admitting. But yeah, I wouldn't trade the experience for anything, and I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. And when I think something negative happens, or when something, a situation doesn't go the way that you anticipate, it is hard, but at the end of the day, I feel like I have an overall sense of peace on, I'm in the space that I'm supposed to be in right now,
yeah.
and that's a really good feeling.
So you talk about curling up in the fetal position. That's something that I think all business owners can relate to. Talk about stress, and I want you to talk about your faith as well and what role that plays in day-to-day stress and things like that.
Yeah, this has been a huge faith builder for me. It's been, a time where, you really have to just trust that God really is going to provide and take care of you in ways that you never would really expect or you've experienced before. My faith has just taken a absolutely huge role in the business, and just kind of my mentality towards the business. I think I wasn't totally a optimistic person, before getting into this. And this has really forced, might be the wrong word, but it's really helped push me towards optimism and, having a glass half full type attitude towards things happening, with, the market that we're in, or just with regard to things that I can't control. And that's the attitude that Christ calls us to, is to, be positive and to have an outlook and perspective on things that really goes over and above the situations that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And, it's really helped me, grow up in some ways, almost, where, you just have to put your best foot forward and figure out how to, deal with a situation that, might not be super favorable to you, but, Christ calls us to push forward and to have a good attitude about it anyway. So, yeah, so it's been a huge part of my faith and a big journey. So,
Yeah, that's great. Some of the things you're alluding to, outside of apart from faith is the kind of fake it till you make it mentality, which I think most business
yeah.
owners can relate to. Do you have an example of a time where you've had to fake it till you make it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got lots of specific situations. I think, just generally what comes to mind is, when you buy a business, you hear people talk about kind of like the J curve in a business. When you buy a business, everybody expects, to, 10x their business and, have all this wild success and sales growth and yada, yada, yada. And, most of the time there's a, prolonged period where the new owner is getting to meet all of, the new clientele and kind of build relationships with them. And typically a lot of these folks are, who the heck is Andrew Plagens from Dallas, Texas? When, you come into the picture. And so, yeah, you're really having to put yourself out there and, not fake it till you make it, but you're really having to try to work to build bridges with these guys that you don't know very well. And yeah, sometimes it can feel a little bit shallow, because at the end of the day, you're selling them something, but there's a big hope that what you are selling them is going to benefit their business as well and bring value to their company, which is really what you want to be doing at the end of the day when you're selling something. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I think the first year I felt like I had this like imposter syndrome almost
Um,
every time that I would talk to, a customer or a new customer or, prospective client, whatever. And, I think that kind of went away as time went on. But most of these guys too that we're dealing with have been in the foundry industry for, a lot of them, their entire life. So 40 plus years. Here I was, in my late 20s. So that's kind of already can be a tough sell when you're talking to somebody with 4 decades of experience in an industry that you're just coming into. So I think you just have to approach those situations with a ton of humility and just kind of from a perspective of I want to get to know you and build a relationship with you and hope that we can find a way to value and benefit your business at the end of the day. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and, like most industries that are dominated by the previous generation, younger guys and gals will come in. And so I'd like to talk about opportunity in this industry.
mm,
As you said the this business was founded in the 80s. So I mean, I feel like that's probably not uncommon. Most of these distribution companies have been around for a long time. What does new opportunity in this space look like? Is there room for new players on the block to come in? You can talk about that. You can talk about some margins that you're seeing already and things like that.
yeah. I think in almost every industry, there's always room for new people and there's always room for disruption. It's really just going to be, who wants to figure out how to solve the problems that we're facing as an industry. And I think right now, with specifics to the aluminum world, whoever can solve all these supply chain choke point challenges that we're having, price issues that we're having with incredibly high priced foreign metal. I think somebody who can come in and start solving some of these issues that are quite frankly very, very hard issues to get around. My customers are paying incredibly high prices right now, and it looks like that's how it's going to be for the foreseeable future. But yes, I think that's what entrepreneurship is really all about is finding a problem on a very simplistic level and figuring out the solution to that problem and then bringing it to market. So yeah, I think that I don't know exactly how it's going to look, but yes, there will be people joining and coming in and out of this industry long after, I'm uh, off this earth. And hopefully, I'm able to do some of that as well with aluminum alloys and just trying to figure out, okay, how do we separate ourselves from the competition? Because, you already mentioned this, but it's a very, very tight margin industry. Distribution is a volume type based business
Yeah.
where you really want to be having as much transaction volume as you possibly can because we don't make much on any given, few transactions. And so I think the more things that you can think of to possibly separate yourself in an industry that is on a decline with respect to our customer base, the foundry industry, yes, it's incredibly important to figure out how to separate yourself and figure out how to bring things to the table that other people aren't. So,
Yeah, that's great. What does the typical business model look like?
so there's I guess I can just kind of explain with context the entire supply chain because that'll probably help me answer your question a little
Great.
bit more. So we're the middleman as the distributor. So we deal in the non-ferrous industry, which essentially just means without iron. It's just a fancy way of saying there's no iron in the metal that we sell. So there's ferrous and non-ferrous. And typically at the back end of the supply chain, you have the smelter who is mining that aluminum out of the ground and then alloying it into whatever type of alloy they want to make. And they have two typical ways that they're going to sell their products direct or through a distributor. So they're only going to sell direct, of course, to the what I'll call captive foundries of the world. And when I say captive foundry, all that means is just foundries that are dedicated to serve a Fortune 500 level manufacturing company like Tesla or Toyota or some company along the lines of just that type of scale and growth. For everybody else, you have foundries who are maybe a little bit smaller mom and pop style foundries. They don't have the volume requirements to go direct. So they're going to buy through a distributor, which is me. So I'll buy by the truckload from my vendors and we will warehouse that metal for them. And my customers will come into the warehouse and buy in smaller quantities. And then we will provide terms to them. So we'll float the paper for them as well, which is a big value add that we can provide as a distributor as well, which I say value add, but it can lead to a lot of different problems and kinks too if you're not careful, which we found out very quickly when we bought the business. So yes, those are typically the two methods that, our customers are going to purchase ingot by. So, or they'll come in and buy the bigger foundries that aren't big enough to buy direct, but they're big enough to sink money into higher volumes. They'll buy from us on a truckload basis. So I'll drop ship a truckload of ingot from, vendor X all the way to my customer, and I'll never take possession of it. I'll just get invoiced for it and then invoice my customer for it on the back end. And those margins get incredibly thin. There's a lot of competition in the industry. So when I get a customer that reaches out for a truckload quote, I know in the back of my mind, okay, I've got three other companies probably quoting this.
Yeah.
So you really have to sharpen your pencil and be careful. But you asked, your original question was, how is your typical aluminum ingot distributor set up? It's not a super big industry, so most of them are relatively small. They're probably anywhere from 2 to 20 employees on average. There really aren't a lot of foundries left in the United States. I think I heard a statistic on a podcast recently where, after World War II, there was something like 5,000 foundries in the US, and now we're down to probably anywhere between 3 to 700.
Wow.
So most of those foundries have unfortunately been either bought and consolidated by private equity, or a lot of that manufacturing work has gone to China. So we're really finding ourselves in a market where there's a lot of people competing for a very small amount of orders. So it's competitive. And that's when relationships really come into play, and knowing your customers and knowing who they buy from. And that is something that takes a long time to figure out. And it's very relational.
Every business owner hits a wall. There's a time where they question everything. What was that time for you? Or has there been multiple times?
Yes. I have one of those times probably on a weekly basis for sure, but they get better and better as the years go by. We've had crazy different things that you don't expect to happen will happen. Like, for instance, a couple of Fridays ago, I was on the couch watching a movie. It was like 9 o'clock at night. And, MK was next to me, and I got a phone call from my freight broker, and when your freight broker is calling you at 9 p.m. on Friday night, it's not going to be good. And we had a situation where we had a truckload of metal moving out of a vendor of ours, and it was on the road to our customers. It was like a 3-day haul. It was supposed to deliver on Monday, and of course, the customer needed the metal yesterday, and he's telling me don't freak out, but we had a situation where the driver took a roundabout turn way too quickly. And when you've got a truckload or 18 wheeler full of, aluminum ingot, it's maxed out at 45,000 pounds. So you have to be incredibly careful with not only how you load that trailer, but how it's driven. And he'd taken a roundabout, and the whole thing just flipped on its side. Ingots went everywhere, and the bundles are actually marked with what alloy the ingots are, but the individual ingots aren't marked. So we didn't know what was what, so we had to take it back to the vendor. Of course, wait till Monday because it's 9 o'clock at Friday. So they had to take it to a warehouse, resort, repackage everything out. They had to scrap some of the metal that was ruined. And, of course, it just makes you look not great in front of your customer, even though you had nothing to do with the
Yeah.
situation that happened. And you kind of just have to deal with it and apologize and explain what happened and hope for a good response. And fortunately, it was a customer who we've got a really good relationship with, and so they were understanding, and we were able to work through it. But yeah, that's stuff like that happens. It's tough. We had another situation, just this is kind of more on the topic of just macroeconomic things that are happening in our world, but we had a smelter, which is one of our biggest vendors, that was shut down. Their gas was turned off due to the Iranian conflict, and they declared a force majeure. So basically an act of God saying that, hey, like, we're not going to be smelting any metal for you guys for the next 12 months at least. So we're taking everything offline. And, I supply my biggest customer through that smelter. And so that was probably a third of my revenue for the rest of the year that just went out the window in about an hour. So, fortunately, it's, taken several months, but we were able to lock in a new contract with another vendor who has decided that they're going to start smelting that alloy in the US. So I think it's probably going to end up being a good thing long term. But yeah, it's a thing when you own your own business, if you just don't really know what any day is going to look like in particular, or what situation that you might be dealing with. You just kind of have to have your hands open
Yeah.
to the whole thing and really try to just put a good foot forward where you can. So
Yes. So it's been 3.5 years since you started. You initially wanted freedom. That's why you did this. Would you go back to working for someone else? Even with all the stress and pain and Friday night, typically at 9 o'clock on Friday night, if you work for the man, you're off work, you turn off your phone and he doesn't expect a response until Monday. But working for yourself, you can't do that. Are you glad you made the switch? Do you still enjoy the freedom?
I tell my wife this all the time. It's kind of a joke, but I tell her if I wasn't able to make anything from the business, I'd still want to be doing what I'm doing and I'd still want to be working for myself. So I don't know. I think there probably would come a point to where I would forcefully have to go get a W-2 job. Fortunately, we're still standing. We're still here, and that hasn't happened yet. I love the ability to work for myself and to kind of establish how I want to do things and run my business. And I take a tremendous level of pride, I think, in just how we do things and the way that I interact with my customers. It's funny, I think most of them are friends now. That's a really good feeling when you can kind of look at just almost like the relational equity that you've put into your customers, and just the interactions that you've had with them over the past few years, and realizing that, hey, okay, they really trust what we're doing, that we're going to take care of them, and that we have their best interest in mind as well. But no, to answer your question, I don't ever want to go back to the corporate world or just the W-2 thing. I just don't think it's for me. But at the same time, this career path that I've chosen to take there's a lot of not fun things too that you have to deal with. And but I really wouldn't trade it for anything at the end of the day, I don't think.
Yeah,
So
that's great. That leads into my next question. Something I ask everybody is, are entrepreneurs born or are they made?
I think they're made.
Okay.
So I think you can for sure be born with certain attributes that are going to pay you well in an entrepreneurship type career path. But at the end of the day, I just don't think there's anybody that is born into becoming an entrepreneur. I think they're even an entrepreneur by acquisition. It's something that I think requires a lot of years after doing this for just only the 3.5 years that I've been doing it. I think it's a career path that really just requires a lot of grit and determination that can really only be learned and forged through fire and flames, so to speak, for
Yeah.
a long period of time.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's great. I feel like I tend to agree with anyone who gives me a reasonable answer, whether it's one or the other or a little bit of both. But I think that's great. Yeah. So what's next for you? What's next for aluminum alloys?
Yeah, I think several different things. Right now, we're in this distribution and manufacturing type space. And something that we do really well at Aluminum Alloys is we're able to kind of compete in a space where we bring a lot of value to our customers with proximity, with the locations of our warehouse. So we can ship to them cheaply, we're close to them, they can have metal on less than a day's notice a lot of times. I'm not hyper focused on trying to scale aluminum alloys to a point to where we've 10x the revenue or just some crazy number from where we are now, because it's not that type of business. It's I guess what I'll call a plow horse business, where the customers that we've had for several decades, most of them, and I'm really hyper focused on just capturing the most of business that we can within our internal customer base as it stands right now. And that's for several reasons, is because a lot of these foundries that are our customers, I mean, they like to have 2 or 3 suppliers, and it's a safety thing for them. If I don't have something, they know that brand X might have it. But also, that means we're missing a lot of orders too. And so It's probably a better use of my time to figure out how to try to capture more of that internal business than trying to go figure out how to sell and put the infrastructure in place to sell to a foundry that's up in the Midwest or the Northeast, and they've probably have relationships with people that they've been buying from for years. And I'm focused on kind of going very deep with the customer base that we have and just continuing to solidify and strengthen those relationships the best we can. I'm really interested in manufacturing right now. My
Yeah.
my dad also has a couple of different manufacturing companies that I'm not involved with on an equity perspective, but we're trying to figure out a few different key things with those companies right now. There's 21 foundries in the state of Texas that pour aluminum, and we're probably currently selling to, 19 or 20 of them. So
Wow.
the
Wow.
couple that we aren't selling to, they're very, very aware of us, and I try to stay in their ear the best I can. But I think the opportunity, as any good salesman should, but I
Yeah.
think the opportunity with me right now is just continuing to capture the most amount of business within our current customer base that we can.
Yeah. That's great. Awesome. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me today on Small Business Strong.
Thank you for having me. I loved being on.